I'm now going to fit a shelf onto this plasterboard wall behind me. It's important when you do this that you actually check that there are no light switches or sockets where you are putting your brackets, because there could be electrical cables in the actual position. This shelf comprises of 2 brackets and a piece of wood that goes in between. So we're going to start it off by fixing 1 bracket onto the wall first. We're going to start off by choosing the position where we want the shelf, which is about there. And we're going to put one of the brackets in position. So we don't want the bracket right at the very end of the shelf, we do want it in a bit, so we're going to put the first bracket approximately there. So I'm just going to take a pen and I'm going to mark one of the fixing holes. Because we are fixing a shelf to a plasterboard wall, we need the best fixings possible, so we're going to use these snap toggles. These are incredibly good and they will give us a really good fixing on the plasterboard. These actually come with a screw like so, and the screw actually screws into that metal part once it's shoved through the plasterboard. But because the brackets have a countersunk hole, it won't look brilliant with the heads sticking out like that. So I've actually purchased some countersunk screws of the correct thread, and they will fit in those holes perfectly, and that will make the job look a lot neater. The packet that the snap toggles actually come in actually tell you what the thread is, and it was a 3/16 UNC. I've now put some safety glasses on and I'm now going to drill the 12mm hole. I'm now going to push the snap toggle through the hole. Once it's through the hole, I'm then going to pull it back. And then I'm going to slide this plastic part forwards until it meets the plasterboard. And then I'm just going to snap off the plastic parts like so. I can now take the bracket on the screw and place that in there. And then we can just nip that up. It doesn't need to be tight at this moment in time. We can then take a spirit level and we can ensure that the first bracket that we fit is perfectly plumb. So you can see that that is perfectly plumb there. So we can now mark the second fixing hole. We can now just move the bracket out of the way and we can drill the second fixing hole. We can then place a second snap toggle through the hole, and then we can pull that back and we can slide down the plastic part. We can then snap off those plastic parts and then we can insert the second screw. We can then check that for being plumb again before tightening up the screws fully. We then need to work out where the next bracket is going to go, and luckily this spirit level is roughly the same width as the actual shelf that we're fitting. So we can just put that on there and we can just space those out equally. What you can do is you can actually measure the distance between the 2 brackets to ensure that you get them in the exact correct position. So they will be about right there. So we now just need to adjust the height until we get the spirit level level. So you can see that that is perfectly level there. So I'm now just going to mark the top fixing hole on this bracket. I can now drill this fixing hole. You can now take the bracket, put that in position, and then screw in the screw. We now just need to check to make sure that it's level, and it is still level. Can make minor adjustments at this point. So I'll just tighten that there, that is perfectly level. And we're then just going to check the second bracket for being plumb. And then I can mark the final fixing hole. I can then just loosen off the top screw. I can now drill the final fixing hole. I can now put the bracket in position and insert the final screw. I'll now just use the spirit level again just to check that the bracket is perfectly straight before we do the final tightening. And we'll also just check that the bracket is still plumb. Once we've done that, we can then give it the final tightening. Now the brackets are both firmly fixed in position, we can now fix the shelf onto the brackets. So I've got that so that it is equally spaced. Now I'm just going to use some tiny screws. I'm going to screw up to hold the shelf in position. So that's how to fix a shelf to a plasterboard wall. The critical point is choosing the correct fixings. This shelf is now very strong and that will take quite a lot of weight, whereas other plasterboard fixings are weak in comparison and they will not hold as much weight.